There is a woman who was never meant to be understood, not because she hides, but because she was never written in a language the world learned to read. Welcome back, wisdom seekers. If you've ever been called too much and too little in the same breath, too cold to be loved, too warm to be ignored, this one was written for you. Today we speak of a woman the world has tried to name 1,000 times and failed 1,000 times. She is not the good girl. She is not the bad girl. She is the one neither title ever fit. Stay close. By the end of this, you may recognize yourself in every line. And if these words find a home in you, let this be the moment you subscribe, not to follow me, but to remember her. Before we go any further, I need to say this plainly. What you are about to hear is only part of her story. The rest of it, the parts too raw, too intimate, too unfiltered for a public video, lives on Patreon, and it lives there because it deserves a space that protects it. This is not a bonus. This is where the real depth begins. If you have ever finished one of these videos wanting more, more is exactly what is waiting for you there. New reflections, entire letters, entire pieces of her you will not find anywhere else. The link is in the description. It is in the pinned comment. Go now, while this feeling is still fresh, because feelings like this one do not wait around for you. 1. She is not silent. She is selective. The world calls her cold long before it bothers to ask why she stopped speaking. It is easier to name her distant than to admit she simply chose you out of a room full of people she said nothing to. Her silence is not absence. It is a door, and doors are not built to open for everyone who knocks. She learned this the hard way, in rooms where her honesty was mistaken for an invitation, where her openness was treated as an offering anyone could take a piece of. So she closed the door, not out of bitterness, out of respect for what was left inside her. There is a particular kind of woman who stops explaining herself, not because she has nothing to say, but because she has finally understood that not every question deserves an answer, and not every person deserves access. She watches now before she speaks. She listens for the sound underneath your words, not what you are saying, but what you are trying to get from her by saying it. This is not paranoia. This is precision. She has been misread too many times to leave her meaning up to chance. And so when she does speak, it lands differently. It is not the noise of someone filling silence out of discomfort. It is a decision. It carries weight because it was not given freely to everyone who came before you. If she has let you into her thoughts, understand what that means. You did not stumble into an open door. You were chosen deliberately out of 100 closed ones. Her selectiveness is often mistaken for coldness by those who wanted easy access to her mind and did not get it. Let them think what they want. She stopped needing to be understood by everyone the day she realized being understood by everyone had never once made her feel less alone. What she wants now is smaller and rarer, to be truly heard by the few who earned it. So if her silence has ever unsettled you, sit with that feeling for a moment. It is not punishment. It is information. It is telling you that you have not yet earned the version of her that speaks freely. And if you have, if you are one of the few who has heard her unguarded voice, you already know there is nothing cold about her at all. There is only a woman who finally learned the difference between being open and being available, and chose on purpose to stop being the second one. 2. Her softness was never weakness. She loved gently once, and the world mistook it for surrender. She gave without keeping score, listened without needing to be listened to in return, and somewhere along the way, people began to treat her kindness as a resource rather than a gift. They took and mistook her generosity for a bottomless well instead of what it actually was, a choice she was making again and again, at a cost only she could see. This is the mistake almost everyone makes about a soft woman. They assume softness means she has nothing underneath it. They assume gentleness is the absence of strength, rather than strength that has simply chosen a quieter shape. But ask yourself this: what does it take to remain tender in a world that keeps handing you reasons to become hard? What does it take to keep choosing warmth after warmth has been weaponized against you more than once? That is not weakness. That is a woman actively resisting the version of herself that pain tried to make permanent. She could have hardened. She had every reason to. Instead, she made a harder choice: to stay soft on purpose, to let her kindness be a decision rather than a wound left open. This is the part people miss when they call her fragile. Fragile things break under pressure and stay broken. She has broken before, more than once, and every time she rebuilt herself back into softness rather than armor. That is not fragility. That is a kind of resilience most people never develop, because most people, once hurt, simply become someone harder to hurt again. She refused that trade. Her softness today is not the softness of someone who has never been tested. It is the softness of someone who has been tested repeatedly and decided deliberately that closing herself off was not a victory worth having. So when you meet her gentleness, do not mistake it for permission to take without giving back. Her softness is not a lack of boundaries. It is a boundary in itself, a quiet, deliberate refusal to let anyone's cruelty turn her into someone she does not want to be. That is not the behavior of a weak woman. That is the behavior of a woman who has already survived what would have hardened someone else and chose every single day since to remain exactly as open as she wants to be, no more and no less. 3. She walks away before you notice she's leaving. By the time you feel her absence, she has already made peace with it. This is what unsettles people most about her. Not that she leaves, but that she leaves so quietly you never catch the moment it happened. There was no explosion, no final argument to point back to, no single sentence you can replay to understand where it all went wrong. That is because her leaving did not begin the day she walked out. It began long before, in 100 small moments you were too comfortable to notice. Moments where she needed something and did not receive it, where she spoke and was not truly heard, where she gave and quietly began keeping a private, unspoken account of exactly how much of herself was going unreturned. She does not leave in anger. Anger would mean she still expected something different from you. By the time she actually walks away, the expecting is already finished. What looks sudden to you was, to her, the last and smallest step of a decision made slowly, deliberately, somewhere you were not paying close enough attention to see. This is the part that is hardest for people to accept about a woman like her, that her calm exit is not coldness, it is completion. She does not need to make a scene to prove that she is hurt, because she has already done her grieving privately, long before the goodbye ever reached your ears. She grieves in advance. She processes in silence. And by the time you're standing in the wreckage of what you lost, she has already begun somewhere else, because she gave herself permission to start leaving the moment she realized staying was costing her more than she was willing to keep paying. There is no dramatic door to point to. There is only the quiet, steady sound of a woman who decided, on her own terms and in her own time, that she deserved a life that did not require her to keep shrinking to fit inside it. If she has ever left you, do not look for the fight that caused it. Look instead for every small moment before it, every time she gave and was not met halfway. That is where her leaving actually started. The final walk away was never the wound. It was simply the last quiet breath of something that had already ended, long before you thought to ask her to stay. I want to stop here and speak directly to you for a moment. If any part of her story so far has felt uncomfortably close to your own, that is not a coincidence. And I do not want you to carry that recognition alone tonight. I wrote 2 books for exactly this moment. The power of her distance walks through what it means to heal through space and love without disappearing into someone else's needs. Choose yourself softly is for the woman learning, maybe for the first time, that her boundaries do not need to be loud to be real. These are not casual suggestions. If tonight's words moved you, these books were written for you specifically. You will find both linked in the description and in the pinned comment, and waiting there with them is a gift I have set aside for the wisdom seekers who go looking for it. Do not scroll past this. Go get what is yours. 4. She is dangerous only to illusions. People call her dangerous, and they are not entirely wrong, but they are almost always wrong about why. She never destroyed a good thing in her life. What she destroyed every time was the story someone else had built about her without her permission. She is dangerous to the version of her that existed only in someone else's imagination, the compliant one, the endlessly patient one, the one who would tolerate anything as long as it came wrapped in enough affection. That woman was never real. She was a comfortable fiction, and the moment reality failed to match the fiction, she was blamed for the collapse of something she never agreed to build in the first place. This is the danger people actually sense in her, not cruelty, but truth. She refuses to keep performing a version of herself that was invented for someone else's comfort. And when that performance stops, when the illusion finally meets the woman standing underneath it, it can feel, to the person who built the illusion, like something has been taken from them, but nothing was taken. Something was simply revealed. She was never obligated to keep pretending to be smaller, quieter, or more agreeable than she actually is, just because that version was easier for someone else to manage. She is dangerous the way truth is dangerous to a lie that has been living comfortably for too long. She does not set out to expose anyone. She simply exists, fully and without apology. And existing fully is sometimes all it takes to collapse a fantasy that depended on her staying half-formed. If you have ever felt threatened by her, ask yourself honestly what exactly you were afraid of losing. Was it her? Or was it the illusion of her that was easier to control? Because the real woman was never the dangerous one. The danger was always in mistaking a living, complicated person for a character who was supposed to stay conveniently still. She stopped staying still a long time ago, and anyone still waiting for that obedient fiction to return will be waiting for a woman who was never real to begin with, while the actual woman, unpredictable, whole, and entirely her own, has already moved on without them. 5. Her distance is devotion, not punishment. When she steps back, the instinct is to take it personally, to read her distance as a verdict on your worth or a punishment for something you did. But this misunderstands her completely. Her distance is rarely about you at all. It is about the one relationship she has learned, often painfully, never to abandon again, the one with herself. There was a time when she gave that relationship away easily, when closeness with others always seemed to come at the cost of closeness with her own mind, her own needs, her own quiet sense of who she actually was underneath everyone else's expectations. She lost herself in people more than once. And each time, coming back to herself took longer than she wanted it to. So now, when she feels herself starting to dissolve into someone else's orbit, she pulls back, not out of coldness, but out of hard-won self-preservation. Her distance is not a wall built to keep you out permanently. It is a boundary built to keep her in, intact, whole, still recognizable to herself at the end of the day. This is devotion in its most disciplined form. Not the loud, performative kind that announces itself constantly, but the quiet kind that shows up in what she refuses to sacrifice anymore, even for people she genuinely loves. She has learned that loving someone fully does not require disappearing into them, and that the healthiest thing she can offer another person is a version of herself that still exists independently, with her own thoughts intact and her own peace protected. So when she steps back, do not assume you are being punished. Consider instead that you may be witnessing a woman actively choosing not to lose herself again, even for someone she cares about. That is not rejection. That is one of the most mature forms of love there is. The kind that says, I will come close to you, but I will not vanish to do it. If you can meet her there, in that careful, deliberate space she has built for herself, you will find a woman capable of real closeness. But it will always be closeness on terms that let her remain whole. That is not too much to ask. It is, in fact, the only kind of closeness worth having at all. 6. She belongs to no definition, not even the ones she once believed. She has been many versions of herself, and she does not apologize for any of them. The woman she was 5 years ago believed things she no longer believes. The woman she was in her last relationship trusted things she would never trust so easily again, and rather than treating this evolution as inconsistency, she has learned to treat it as evidence that she is still alive, still paying attention, still willing to grow even when growth means leaving a former version of herself behind. This is what makes her so difficult to hold on to for people who prefer certainty. They want to know exactly who she is so they can predict exactly what she will do, and she refuses to be predictable simply for someone else's comfort. She outgrows her opinions the way she outgrows everyone else's opinions of her, without ceremony, without needing permission, without staying loyal to a version of herself that has already stopped fitting who she has become. This unsettles people who mistake consistency for integrity. But she has learned that the two are not the same thing. Integrity means staying true to what she actually values in this moment, even if that means contradicting what she valued a year ago. Consistency, the rigid kind people demand of her, would mean staying loyal to a former self, simply to avoid making anyone uncomfortable with her growth. She chooses integrity every time. This is why no single definition of her ever holds for long. Not the good girl, not the bad girl, not even the labels she once placed on herself, back when she was still learning who she was beneath everyone else's expectations. She belongs to no fixed idea, including her own outdated ones, and that is precisely what makes her impossible to fully hold and impossible to fully forget. People remember her not as one clear image, but as a series of moments, each one slightly different from the last, each one undeniably her. That, more than anything else, is the truest thing about her. Not that she is hard to understand, but that she refuses to stop becoming long after everyone else around her has settled into something fixed and finished. 7. She rewards presence, not performance. She has watched enough performances to know the difference between someone who is truly present with her and someone who is simply saying the right things in the right order. Grand gestures do not move her the way they used to. She has been given flowers by people who were not listening. She has been told beautiful things by people who forgot the details of her life within a week. So she stopped being impressed by performance a long time ago and started paying attention instead to something much quieter and much harder to fake, whether someone actually shows up consistently in the small, unglamorous moments that never make it into anyone's highlight reel. Presence to her looks like remembering something she mentioned once, in passing weeks ago. It looks like someone noticing when her voice changes, even slightly, and asking what is wrong before she has to say anything at all. It looks like consistency on an ordinary Tuesday, not just effort on an anniversary. This is what she rewards, and it is also what she withholds herself from until she sees it. She is not interested in someone's potential to be present. She's interested in the evidence repeated over time that someone actually is. This makes her seem hard to win over, and in some ways she is. But it is not because her standards are unreasonable. It is because she has learned, through real experience, that performance is cheap and presence is expensive, and she is no longer willing to trade her attention for the first when what she actually needs is the second. If you find yourself trying to impress her with a single grand moment, you are likely to be met with polite appreciation and very little else. But if you show up quietly, again and again, in ways that require no audience and earn no applause, you will find a woman who notices everything, remembers everything, and rewards that kind of steady presence with a depth of trust that no performance could ever buy. She is not asking for perfection, she is asking for consistency, and she has learned, the hard way, exactly how rare that actually is. 8. She was never missing, she was becoming. For a long time, people spoke about her as though something were missing, as though her quiet, her distance, her refusal to fit neatly into either the good girl or the bad girl story meant there was a gap somewhere inside her that needed to be filled by someone else. They were wrong. Nothing was missing. She was becoming, and becoming rarely looks like arrival. It looks unfinished. It looks like silence where explanation used to be. It looks like a woman who is no longer performing certainty because she is busy doing the much harder, much quieter work of actually finding out who she is beneath every label that was ever placed on her. This is the final truth beneath everything we have spoken about tonight. She was never the paradox people accused her of being. A paradox implies two things that cannot coexist, and yet somehow impossibly do. But there was never any contradiction inside her at all. There was only a woman who refused to be simplified into a single, convenient category for someone else's ease of understanding. Good and bad were never the only two options. They were simply the only two words most people knew how to reach for. She outgrew that vocabulary entirely. What she became instead cannot be captured in a single word, and that is exactly the point. She is not a puzzle waiting to be solved by the right person. She is a woman in motion, continually revising her own definition, continually choosing herself over the comfort of being easily understood. If you have spent this entire video trying to categorize her, trying to decide once and for all whether she is the good one or the dangerous one, let this be your answer. She is neither, and she never needed to be. She was never missing a piece that someone else was destined to provide. She was simply, quietly, relentlessly becoming, and she is not finished yet. Perhaps that is the most Sigma female thing about her of all. Not the mystery, not the distance, but the sheer, unapologetic refusal to ever stop growing into someone new. So no, she was never the good girl or the bad girl. She was the girl who stopped asking which one she was supposed to be. And somewhere between her silence and her softness, she became something far rarer than either, herself, uncontested. If this found you today, it found you for a reason. If tonight's words felt like they were written about you, do not let that feeling fade before you act on it. The deeper reflections, the letters I only share in that quieter space, they are on Patreon, and they are waiting for you right now, linked in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you want two companions for the road ahead, The Power of Her Distance and Choose Yourself Softly are there too, with a gift set aside for the ones who go looking. This is not a someday thing. This is a tonight thing. Until next time, Wisdom Seeker, may your silence stay sacred and your softness stay yours alone.